Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, let's look at how we can create the API routes. Next.js supporting complete full stack end-to-end application features. And as part of this, if you want to write API methods and connect the database and fetch the data and send it to the UI. So this portion from the component to make the API call for a complete full stack application, we need to create the API routes. So let's look at how we can create the API routes and the endpoints for the component to make the call and get the data. So let's focus only on creating the APIs instead of consuming the data and displaying on the page. Okay, only the API routes. Okay, now I just added a schema file. Okay, to connect to the database. Okay, this is the local PostgreSQL database that I have. Okay, so this is the database and this is the URL of the database which is running on my local, and I created a table, okay, called to-dos, and it has an ID, name, username, and created it. So these are the four fields that we have. So okay, so to see this data, this is the table, and currently I have two records. Okay, right now I have two records in this particular table. Okay, so now let's look at how we can write the APIs to connect to the database and get the data. Okay, this is called API routes. Okay, to create for this to connect to with the database, I'm using Prisma library. This is Prisma client that I'm using. Okay, I just added the Prisma client entry in this index file. Okay, it should be under the src folder. Okay, so to start with the API routing, so under the pages there should be a folder called API. Okay, within this API, whatever the files that you write, Next.js considers that these are the API route files. Okay, so to write a file API route, so for suppose since I have a to-dos table to read the data from, so for that reason I'm just naming it as to-dos. Okay, and within this file, okay, within this I can add a file name index.ts. Okay, so within this, so when we call localhost 3000 API to-dos, it will hit this particular index file. Okay, within this, first thing I need to import the Next.js request and Next.js response. Okay, Next.js request and Next.js API response. So these are the two things that I need. So request is to get hold of the request parameters, and the response is to respond back to the client from this particular method. Okay, along with this, to connect to the database, I need a Prisma client. Okay, Prisma from, I already included Prisma in this. I already created the Prisma client here. Okay, index. If you go to this particular folder, you see this is the Prisma client that I added. Okay, I need to make an entry of this in the package.json and create this Prisma client. This is same for any database. Okay, now I imported the Prisma client. Now I have both of this. Now I can start writing the actual function. So I'll write a function export. So default it will be a async function. Okay, and I'll name it as a handler. It will get a request of Next.js request, API request, and a response of Next.js response. Okay, these are the two parameters. Okay, within this I need to check the request method name. Okay, if the request method is get, okay, I'll go inside this, and if okay, for right now let's look at get. Okay, we'll look at the other ones later. Okay, in this first thing I'll just try to catch if there is any exception. Okay, and response dot status of 500. This is server error. Okay, and the JSON response is going to be the exception that I'll just return. Okay, within this, now I use the Prisma client to connect to the database and fetch the records. Okay, so since I get to-dos as a response, okay, since it is async function, I use await, and here I'll use Prisma dot to-dos. Why I'm using to-dos? Because in this Prisma client, this is what I mentioned in the table name. So we have to use the exact table name. Okay, dot find many. It will return all the records from the table. Okay, so once I get the records, I'll respond with the status code of 200 since the read is successful, and the JSON content of to-dos. Okay, now since I have two records in this to-dos table, I should be able to get these two records. Okay, to hit this API, okay, I have a Thunder client here. Okay, this is a API URL. Why? Because API localhost 3000 API to-dos. Okay, when I hit to-dos, it should hit this particular index. Okay, let's check. Now if you see, I hit this particular API. Okay, now I see these two records. Okay, let me add one more record here. Okay, okay, I added third record. Okay, the name is not saved. Okay, I added one more record. There are three records. Okay, now let's check. Let me hit this. See, now I got three records. Okay, this is how you can create the API route to get the multiple records. Okay, now let's add one more method to get a single record. Okay, now to get a single record, okay, in this API, for this to get a single record, I need to pass the ID, right, to get the record. Okay, now there is no API that is matching this particular URL. Okay, so that's why we are seeing this issue. Let's create the 404. Let's create how we can get create this API route to accept the parameter. Okay, so right now, since we have index, so it will just handle only the URL that will match this. Okay, anything like a get method, it will go to to-dos. Post method also it will go to to-dos. But put method, delete method, and reading a specific record, it should get the ID. We can still pass the ID as part of the request body, but we can pass it as part of the path parameter right now. Okay, for this to accomplish, all we need to do is we need to create a file, okay, with this ID and the TS file. Okay, this is how you need to create a file, and within this file again we need these two. Okay, along with this, let me just copy the function as well. Okay, since we are going to pass the ID, okay, I'll note down, I'll get this ID from request.query.id. Okay, so once I get the ID, I need to, instead of find many, now I need to within the find many itself, I can pass the parameter, okay, and saying where within this ID will be to-do ID. Okay, Why I'm converting it to number? Because if you see, this is the integer. Okay, for that reason I'm converting into the number. Okay, now we have the function API to-dos and ID. Okay, let's validate this whether it is working. Okay, so this is the API that was not working before. We are passing this. Let's check how many records we have. Total of 3 records. Let's get this first record. Okay, so it should get taking class. Okay, now if you see, we got this taking class record. Okay, now if you try the number 2, we got the second one, and number 3 we got the third one, and number 4 we don't have. Okay, that's why it is empty.